Hey folks, Dr. Mike here for Making Progress. I guess I'm Mike Israetel on this channel since I don't have an advanced degree in whatever the hell it is we talk about. And today's video is going to be very, very controversial. It is going to get a lot of feelings poked at. And so that's the big caveat, and I'll caveat this more as I go along. But our last video was kind of about how the modern alliance of sort of free countries and peaceful and prosperous countries need to get together and to make sure that they don't tolerate other countries being oppressive and terrible to their people and the people of the world. Yes, the modern alliance should police the world, I said, and explain my reasoning and maybe disagree with it, maybe agree with it, to whatever extent. This lecture, so that was video 33, this is video 34, and it weaves right off of that into even more controversy. And today's lecture is when and how to nation build, to build nations. Crazy. This is in the policy sphere. I have 6 things to talk to you about. The first is to define what a failed state is, talk about what that really looks like. Next, we'll talk about when a country is able to run itself and conversely when it is not, when the people of a country can run. We'll talk about why democracy almost always fails to revitalize failed states, because a lot of times you'll have a failed state. We'll define that in a second, but basically a really shitty place to live that doesn't have a lot of law and order and tons of chaos. And a lot of times people will be like, democracy, that's the thing we want. And it turns out democracy rarely works in that regard. We'll talk about why. Democracy is amazing, but it needs some initial conditions in order to work, and those are often absent in failed states. We'll talk about what, in my view, are the 3 main focuses of nation building, what they should be, kind of in logical sequence. So first you establish one, then you establish the next, then you establish the third. And after that, hopefully, the nation becomes stronger and stronger over time, and eventually you get to a point where self-governance can occur. The last thing we'll talk about is the downsides of this approach, of which there are many, and the attempt to nation build usually doesn't look like what I'm going to tell you. My argument is that when it looks more like this, it succeeds more often than it fails. When it looks less like this, it fails more often than it succeeds, but it does have huge downsides. But it has been pulled off before, and for very good reasons. Hopefully after this little chat, understandable reasons. Quick couple caveats before I continue on with even more caveats. I am not a trained economist. I am not a moral or political philosopher. I am a total dilettante, but apparently people like the sound of my voice. So here you go. 45 minutes of ASMR incoming. JK. Yeah, I mean, most of that is for real. I don't know how good my voice sounds, but I think I might be able to make some sense on this topic, and I think the worst thing I can do is say a bunch of wrong shit and give you guys a lot of good batting practice refuting my points in your own head or in the comments. The best thing I can do is to get some of you guys who maybe weren't thinking about these kinds of dynamics in the way in which I'm going to describe them to think a little bit more about these dynamics in the way in which I'm going to describe them. And maybe some of your thought around that can get you one of these moments where you're like, okay, most of this is dog shit. This guy's an idiot way out of his field. But a few of the points at least got me thinking a little bit. And that's the most I can hope for, and hopefully you get at least that. But if you hate what I'm saying, feel free to call me the worst words in the world in the comments. All right. So time to get controversial. Here it is. Failed states. Sometimes states, nations, with names and places on a map, do not have enough of what is called government or state capacity to run a safe, functioning country in the least. Some examples. Some of these are a little bit more historic. Some are continuing to be a problem to this day. Most are continuing to be a problem. And the problem is majorly for their own, almost exclusively for their own people. So this is not about how their countries affect the world. That was the last lecture, 33. This is how these countries affect their own citizens' lives. So Haiti, notoriously over and over failed state. Currently, as I give this lecture in March of 2024, I believe that Haiti has no functioning central government and literal cannibalism in the streets. I'm not joking. Google that. Somalia, another example, Gaza, though not a country, it does have some form of government, but sure as shit failed its people in a major way, mostly by taking billions of dollars of aid to regular people and using it to build an industrial military machine and turn the place into a fortress. And against that fortress, no one has attacked since the year 2007, and they did most of the building after 2007, and then launched an offensive war against a neighboring country, which is to say Israel. So I won't get into Israel-Gaza dispute here and enough radioactive bullshit on this channel. Feel free to hit me up with a free Palestine, or you don't support Israel enough in the comments. Very well. But nobody can describe Gaza as a great place to be. And whoever's fault you think that is, it's just a matter of fact that Gaza has no well-functioning central government. That's all I'm trying to say about it. Plenty of blame for Gazans, plenty of blame for Israelis, no doubt, on both sides. And I'll leave it at that. Here's the thing. The degree of suffering and missed opportunity for livelihood for regular people in these nations is insanely high. There are not a lot of success stories in Haiti. And cultural diversity is dope. The Japanese live different than the Greeks, and there's not a single fucking problem with that. But these specifically failed states are not different ways of running a country. They're the wrong ways by basically any metric you can come up with. Almost anything you can measure is worse in Haiti, worse in Somalia, worse in a variety of places that don't have functional governments than in places that do have functional governments. Here's my big contention, and this is insanely controversial, and seems to be the kind of controversial that you would think. I probably predict a lot of the comments will be like, Mike, I thought you knew better than this. And maybe I just don't. Maybe I'm just not nearly as intelligent as you may have assumed or educated in history. But my contention here is that if there is a failed state, definitively and long-term, years and years of failed statehood, I think it's okay for the modern world alliance, NATO, fucking even China, anyone that can help, that has civilization, to potentially consider, notice I'm choosing my words very carefully and very in a nuanced, low-key way, to come in and kind of help run the country for the folks that live in it until, and always the goal, they can run it internally and democratically again. That's what I'm saying. So when people can't run their own country, you might have to come in there and do it for them. Now, here's the thing. I'm not saying it's our moral imperative. Absolutely not. You can just let people be free. Freedom is the number one value that I espouse on this channel for sure. And so, like, if the place is fucked out, we don't have to go over there. Nonsense. For sure. I'm not even saying it's the right decision every time to go nation build, run a country for people and build it up for them. I'm not even saying it's the case most times, right? Sounds a shitload like colonialism, and to some extent it really is, and a lot of times it fails. It might even fail most times. What I'm saying is simply this, and after I'll give you my sort of ultimate evil plan. It should be a consideration that's on the table to come in and help people run their country. Not something considered so icky that gives you so many feelings, whichever side of the aisle you come from. If you're ultra conservative, you think we should just like see only our country and nothing else out in the world. If you're ultra far left, you think that any kind of top-down relationship to another people's, especially one of a different skin color, is just absolutely the worst thing in the world, and racist, imperialist, whatever ist you want to put there. A lot of people just don't think anymore after that, and they will not even endorse the thought of potentially going in there and helping. And look, I know a lot of times going in there helping just turns into exploitation and turns into fucking years and years of civil war. However, it should be something we think about because it has had success stories. Easy two success stories, post-war Germany and Japan. And in a sense, they weren't totally uncivilized before, so there is some nuance there. But technically speaking, the main success story is that for most of the history of most of the world, other larger, more civilized, more advanced cultures came in and civilized the place, often with a level of brutality we would never try to replicate. But the result, at the end, dog shit way to get there, was civilization that benefited the very people that live there. It should be a consideration, but there's 50 trillion ways to do it wrong, most of the ways we've tried to do it, and a few ways which I would just like you to consider maybe something on the right track. And maybe I'm totally off my fucking rock. So let's talk about what the general preconditions are for a country to be able to run itself democratically, for the people to really be able to run a country. This is not really controversial. And I'm not going to say anything here that's like, whoa, that's definitely not clear. Roughly in order of priority of sequence of how you establish these things and how they come to be, at the end of that, you're pretty much ready for democracy and self-running government. Before all of these things are instantiated, there's a good argument that you're on the margins not ready, and if you lack all of these, you're almost certainly not ready to run your own country. First, when rule of law exists and violence and theft are not rampant, like in Haiti, there is no rule of law. You got a gun, you're the law, unless a guy has a bigger gun and he's 2 blocks away, and then he's the fucking law. There is no central government power. Violence and theft are just a normal thing that happens all the time. Bad news. Bad news because there's kind of nothing left to run. There is no state that can enforce the rule of law. Next, when economic growth is strong and when wealth to support basic life needs is available to all, when people are hand to mouth, just red in tooth and claw, starving and crawling over each other to survive, it's real tough to pull off self-governing democracy. Real hard to do. Next, if the citizenry isn't educated in basic 12th grade modern standards, I'll talk about what that means in a second, it's real tough to run any system because systems operation requires a bit of an education, and even proper voting requires a bit of an education. I'll put it another way, the more educated your populace is, the better the outcome is for your democracy. If the vast majority of people in your country just know the one religious book that they're taught, and even some other person teaches them that because they're illiterate and they think the world is flat, it is really difficult to get them to understand parliamentary democracy, for example. You're just not going to be able to pull it off in most cases. Next, when freedom of the press and transparency in government exist. There is no democracy in Russia, for example. I'm not saying Russia is a candidate for nation building. They got something, though we probably, if they didn't have nuclear weapons, you'd definitely go in there and run it better for them. As a matter of fact, Russian kings used to regularly invite people from the Nordic countries, princes and kings from the Nordic countries, to run the country and teach them how to be civilized. This happened all the time, voluntarily. And so a lot of Russia, unfortunately, still isn't there, but freedom of the press and transparency in government does not exist in Russia, and thus they don't have a democracy. They cannot have a democracy because they don't have freedom of the press and they don't have transparency. So if some person gets elected, like Putin, he just never leaves, and the government has full control of the media, so it lies to its citizenry. They're good with it. Nobody asked, nobody answered. Lastly, when the citizenry is educated on how to vote democratically, and especially, really big deal, respect the process. What do I mean by this? This means that fundamentally, you're still for the team, for the society, for your fellow man and woman, even if your party loses. For example, people who say, not my president, and I'm not going for Biden or Trump people, Democrats and Republicans, or whatever you are from Europe or Asia where you're watching this, whatever party, I'm not siding with a party. People say, not my president. They say that as kind of like a little joke, a little jab, like people call Hillary Killery or whatever, Trump, I don't know what to call him, kind of makes fun of himself more than anything else, whatever pejorative you want to use. Yeah, he actually still is your president. So I wasn't a big fan of Donald Trump when he got elected. Don't worry, I was an even less big fan of Hillary. Sure as fuck did not vote for her. I'm not a huge fan of Joe Biden. How can you be a fan of someone that isn't alive anymore? Weekend at Bernie's was a fun movie, but that's not cool when you're the president. And when Trump almost certainly wins again in a few months here, I'm sure shit not going to be a fan of him either. But those people have all been my president because I reside in the United States of America and I love America and freedom way more than I'm like persnickety about one president or the other. And despite what doomsayers say, my parents legitimately told me that Obama's tenure at presidency, first of all, will cause totalitarianism in the United States. And also, he'll never leave. My dad was fully convinced that Obama would never leave the presidency. He would just become king. And predictably, because my dad's not the first person to have this many feelings about a president, people have hated presidents of the United States a lot. As a matter of fact, they used to hate them more, so much so that some presidents of the United States were assassinated. Thank fucking God that doesn't happen anymore. Assassination attempts continued well through the 80s in the United States. And that's not playing for the same team. And look, nothing happened. Obama was in charge. Same shitty government overreach happened under Obama, under Trump, under Biden. Same shit. Here's the thing, though. The people that say not my president, they don't really mean it. Because, yeah, the president sucks, and you can totally and should say that. You don't have to be like, I love it, another president to cooperate with. Fuck that. Fuck the president, right? But you still have to do your best together as a team with all of your fellow humans until the next election where you get another shot and get your guy into office. And even though some folks in the USA act like not my president, they still go to work. They still pay their taxes. And if an old lady stutters in front of them, they catch her, even though she has a Hillary bumper sticker on her car. You're not going to fucking let an old lady fall. Jesus Christ. You're a civilized human. People have political differences, ones that you fucking hate, but you're still fundamentally on the same side. That's a very, very different thing that when your president doesn't win the election, there's a full-scale military-grade revolution, which happens to like a third of the countries in Africa every election cycle. That is what we're talking about when we talk about democratic values. Democratic values can be summed up with when the other person loses, you're like, shit, fine, fuck it, whatever, still going to work. I'm not picking up my AR and going to the White House. That's what that means. And that's the only thing it means. We take that shit for granted here. When an election goes south in Poland or goes south in France or goes south in the UK or goes south with the whole fucking Biden vote counting controversy and shit like that, you don't have revolution. Yeah, the January 6th thing was just a bunch of fucking insane people, and everyone knows that. It was fun while it lasted, but it wasn't really a serious revolution. Leftists will tell you that was an attempted total revolution. That's a whole bunch of fucking dog shit. There was no mass revolution. That's what we want. And all of us are taking that for granted. So, of course not. Like if Biden wins the next election, I don't think a lot of people, hopefully I don't have to eat my words on this, Jesus, I don't think a lot of people are going to New York and like taking over New York and like, now this is the Republican Party of New York. This is not a thing that happens. And you talk to most people in France and the UK and America and Poland, and they're like, yeah, of course that doesn't happen. Like, we just hate the fucking guy and we, accuse him of election fraud and whatever, but, still go to work, still pay my taxes, just don't shoot random people with guns or try to make my own government. But that is just a testament to how much we take civilization for granted, because there are huge numbers of countries in the world in which a transition of government almost always and almost everywhere means violent revolutionary war. And sometimes that war never ends. Like, take Yemen, for example. Yemen is a failed state. Why? Because they have a sub-state in them run by the Houthis who are just in charge, and they have guns, and the other army can't beat them. What the fuck is that? They're not going anywhere. Is there a part of the United States of America or France or Poland in which violent militia controls that part and keeps the government out? That's crazy. That's the shit we don't want. That's all respecting democracy means, just putting up with it. It can mean much more lovey-dovey shit if you want, but we're not trying to shoot high in the sky here. Now, why can democracy not function in failed states? A lot of times, what you want to do as a human is you want to say democracy is great, and it really is, because it's everyone deciding together. It's, in a certain sense, a consensus. And we say, okay, look, we're going to go to this country that got fucked up by civil war, some shit like that. Let's take Iraq. Technically a failed state after Saddam shit the bed. And we're going to give them democracy, because democracy is good and all people are fundamentally equal, which I totally believe. And they're going to do great, because democracy is great. People deserve it. And they're going to fucking knock it out. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be another fucking Taiwan. No problem. But there's a problem with that, is that when you are missing certain things, you can't actually have an effective democracy, which means you have to go and do a different approach. Larger powers externally take over, and they're in charge. And the people in that country, for some time, and I'll describe how long that time roughly is, they don't get to vote on anything, because they don't have the structure on which to build democracy. For nation building to work, the modern alliance must establish these fundamental underpinnings of democracy without democratic approval from local people, because they lack the foundation for effective democracy. They don't have rule of law, some combination of strong economy, educated citizenry. Let's take Iraq, for example, as a fun example there. Rule of law, for a long time, not really, now sort of. Economic growth, strong, no, not at all. Educated citizenry, not really. Freedom of the press, I don't know, not really. Citizenry educated and values bought into the democratic process. Like if you just let the Sunnis and Shiites just go at it, this is going to be fucking war. That's what it always is. Someone needs to come in there and stop that shit. When you lack a lot of these basic foundations, running your own country is something you can't really do. And it's not like I'm making a purely esoteric theoretical argument. They literally cannot do it as illustrated. I would love an existence proof of here, of people who are mostly illiterate and insanely religious at the expense of others, run on their own amazing functioning government with high standards of living and amazing economic growth, and everyone's free and women can walk around and not get the R word, which YouTube seems to like to ban us for. I don't know where that is. It's not around. Now, not all people in that country who currently are not running their country well can't do it. Many of them can, but clearly not a critical mass. And some fraction of these people that are currently not running the country, they're not doing it because they can't, or to be more technical, the probability of running a non-failed state internally only is very low. And when you clearly can't do it and have not done it, maybe someone in there externally, a world alliance, can come in and help you do it instead. And I'll be more specific with what I mean about that in just a little bit. Now, when you do nation building, still with me on this, there need to be 3 foci, I don't know how the fuck to say that, roughly in a row. And there cannot be a democracy, and should not be an attempt to create a democracy, until you knock these out and establish them very firmly. First, law and order. Establishing law and order does not require people's consent, by the way. This is typically done through an external military coming in and setting up martial law, which is just law enforced by the military. You may have a problem with the police telling you what to do, but you're not going to have a problem with the military telling you what to do until and unless you want to be jailed or killed. The military is real good at that, so they're going to lose. Everyone who comes up against a modern military is going to lose that fight. Now, it's not the modern military forever. It's the military comes in and then slowly over time trains up a local police force. And the local police force over time takes over law enforcement function. This means a couple of really nasty things, and I'm going to spell them out, but they're necessary. There is no alternative to this in the real world, unfortunately, or alternatives don't often present themselves. First, that means the military/local police, first a lot of one, then a lot of the other over the years, has to kill or jail violent criminals and violent political actors. If you want to overthrow the provisional government that's trying to make your country better, you either go to jail or you die. One of the two. You want to pick up an AK? You're dead. You want to be, caught in your compound plotting the revolution? You go to jail. No need for senseless violence and total depravity, but sometimes motherfuckers got that shit coming to them because they want the war. No problem. You got it. You have to do this for long enough until the violent people are so few and far between that they're just not a major factor anymore. For example, are there violent would-be revolutionaries in the United States? Fuck yeah. Violent-ass Antifa leftists send fucking people mail bombs. There's violent-ass, racist-ass, redneck fucking people who, want the fucking, Christian nation or some crazy shit like that. And they're around, but there's so few of them, and they're so weak that they're not a factor, and civilization continues on. Like every now and again, you have a Waco, Texas type of situation, which is super unfortunate, but that's about it. So when you have a huge fraction of these people in a country, essentially warlords or mini tyrants, jail or death. Or they can just cut it out and just go to work and be peaceable like anyone else. Most of them will do that. Maybe the top dogs will go down fighting or go to jail, but most of the underlings are like, man, fuck this. Like, we're losing. It's clearly a bad idea. I don't want to fight anymore. And if they want to fight anymore, you just got to mow them down. I know that sounds really fucked up, and it is super fucked up. But like, ISIS was defeated a few years ago, at least for some quite long time. How was ISIS defeated? Guys, real talk. The Delta Force and a bunch of international cooperating partners and a huge role for the Iraqi military, they just killed them all, bro. They just killed almost all the top people, and the next layer under and 80% of the layer under that. There's just no one to pick up the gun anymore. There's no one to fucking throw out the pamphlets. It's just gone. That factor, that process of establishing one overarching state actor, this has been referred to by Steven Pinker, I think he was quoting other people, as the Leviathan, from the Bible, actually, the ultra-powerful to whom there is no recourse. You're going to lose that fight. And the process of people adapting to the existence of that Leviathan and either becoming peaceful or becoming jailed or becoming dead takes a while, and it has been called by some the civilizing process. And it sounds super fucking brutal, and you go, dude, what the fuck? Like, why are you doing this to these people? Why did we not go through this? We did. And by we, I mean people who live in modern countries of the world. During the various eras in Japan, you had the samurai era, tons of warlords, people walked around with samurai swords, and guess what? Almost all the violent, independent samurai died. They died in combat. They had fewer children than everyone else, their genes became lower frequency, and the fraction of violent people reduced. That's fucked up, but also culturally. People saw all the combatants, all the warlords die, and they were like, do I want any of this? It's all fun and games. One of the ways you know you don't have a civilizing process in effect is when you see kids throwing rocks at tanks. It's an insane proposition that automatically makes you assume that the kids aren't really afraid of the tanks, which is kind of fucked up. If you got a place where kids are running and hiding from tanks, it's usually a fucked up place. But at the very fucking least, you fuck the kids. We're not trying to hit up the kids, but at least you keep the attempted warlords in awe. And slowly over time, you kill, jail, or allow most of them to just give up the art and practice of fighting against leadership, period. Because we want to build a government. And if you're not at least consenting now, that doesn't mean we come for people's guns. Not at all. Have all the guns you want. Use them for self-defense. Walk around with guns on you. Amazing. You raise your guns up against the provisional government, that's it. You're fucked. And this happened everywhere. It happened all through Europe. England and France used to be just agglomerations of really warlords, nobles and things like that, various kings and fiefdoms, and they fought each other. And then slowly but surely one or the other expanded because they won more shit. And then everyone who rose up against the government just fucking got it. And that's straight up how civilization works. Civilization can work in some Pocahontas ethereal world that never existed. If people just looking around, they were violent a minute ago. They're, you guys know what? If we're just cooperative with each other and build an awesome consensus government with tons of transparency, we're going to have it all. Sometimes that happens to some extent, sort of, Singapore maybe, but in most cases that just doesn't fucking happen at all, and you need someone to put the fucking hammer down, and in these countries, that's just the case. Law and order establishment is two things: insanely straightforwardly effective and insanely politically and morally unpalatable. You don't want to see law and order get enforced against the people that aren't interested in it. It's fucking brutal. It's like the Empire from Star Wars fucking up locals. It sucks. But there's a very big difference between going to try and oppress and exploit people versus being like, hey, you can't kill each other, you can't shit in the street, and here's an opportunity for you to engage in the economy freely and peaceably with each other. If you do that, we'll leave you the fuck alone. Nobody's coming for you. No one's exploiting you. There's no crazy tax or anything like that. But if you fuck around and you get violent back to your old shit, we're going to fuck you up. Huge, huge difference. So you can get the Star Wars Empire vibes and be like, no, that sounds bad. Yeah, that sounds bad. But the problem with the Empire isn't that it enforces the law. It's that the law is fucking immoral as shit and they exploit the fuck out of everyone. That's the problem, right? Similar idea to, get myself canceled for this one, people think that acknowledging human differences and studying racial differences in race science is why the Nazis are bad. Bullshit. You guys want to know why Nazis are bad? Because they use the government to exterminate huge groups of people. The communists never said anyone was different. They said everyone was equal. And guess what they did? They used the government to exterminate huge groups of people. And that is not at all what I'm calling for here. In fact, the very opposite. The extermination is already occurring. Is Haiti a safe place to be? No. Do we want a power there that enforces the predictable, strict, modern, sensible, noble, dare I say, rule of law? Yeah, fuck yeah. That beats the living shit out of going to Haiti and just freewheeling it and getting eaten or some shit like that. Once you have rule of law established and well on its way, you have to establish the rules and laws for wealth creation. You can't keep giving people food aid and economic aid in perpetuity, mostly because you will just have them be dependent on aid in perpetuity, and it's effacing to people. It's offensive. Almost everyone generates a sense of value and purpose from producing for themselves, and it's also non-sustainable. Even if it is sustainable, like, it's fucking insulting. You're not keeping someone as a fucking pet. That's crazy. You want them to thrive in their own right. So you have to establish the rules and laws for wealth creation, which, by the way, to modern economists are just not controversial. It's a solved problem for advanced countries. You have basic regulations. You have known regulatory environment that everyone has access to, predictable laws, a largely free economy, and that's it. There you go. Boom. Shit does the rest. Adam Smith solved that problem fucking 300 years ago, and it's been uncontroversial ever since. And I'm not talking about the nuances of this much regulation or that much regulation. I'm talking about the basics. Shit you have in France that's not so economically free, but pretty fucking free. Bro, even shit you have in India beats the fuck out of the nothing that you have in Somalia, for example. And inside that establish the rules and laws for wealth creation, the establishing rules and laws part is a humongous emphasis on the following, which is maybe one of the most important parts of this whole process. A constant search and serious response. Search for and serious response to corruption. Corruption is a non-starter for functioning governments. It's a non-starter. And you can have a functioning government with corruption, but you can't have a very well-functioning democracy or a country that produces a lot of wealth that's corrupt. Name a country that's ultra-corrupt that's also growing at a really rapid pace and has already a very high standard of living and has freedom and prosperity for all. I'll wait. It just doesn't exist. There are a couple of sort of odd exceptions with the oil countries of the Middle East, but really that's just because they got free money coming out of the fucking ground. And even the best countries in those regions are significantly less corrupt. United Arab Emirates, Qatar, etc., way, way, way less corrupt than Iran, Iraq, Syria, which, by the way, as of now is also a failed state. Corruption cannot be allowed to continue. This is a prerequisite for a very well-functioning society. Every place that's the best place in the world, I always bring up two countries as just kind of like, just because they're awesome, Japan and Sweden. They just basically have almost no corruption by modern standards. And believe it or not, the United States is very low corruption on the global corruption index. Google in your own time. Corruption index, there's a few indices that roughly run similarly and get similar results. Look up the countries at the very bottom list, the most corrupt. Those are not places you want to be. Corruption has to be threaded out. But it's not actually that hard to thread out corruption if you're an external power. You are there and you're sort of letting people enforce the rule of law, but you have an unbelievable amount of oversight and you're really hard to bribe. Like, an Iraqi person how do they bribe someone who's in a provisional government role that's a member of, Britain's military? What is an Iraqi person going to give you if you're a British soldier that's like going to make you like, all right, well, fuck it. Well, fuck the rule of law. It's real tough. It's actually easier to enforce corruption externally than it is internally, because internally, shit, you can get bought, sold, 50 ways from everything. Lastly, number 3 thing to establish. So far, we have established law and order, must establish the rules and laws for wealth creation so people can start to build up wealth. I'll tell you why this is important in a little bit. And then lastly, establish a basic primary education system. Now, this is starting to sound real fucking totalitarian. This is starting to sound like we're just proselytizing people in our way of doing things and not their local way. There is a cynical part of me, and this is all joke, but it's like, yeah, your local way blows dick. So now we're going to try it our way. I don't really mean that, and here's why. We're only going to teach 2 things in our basic education system when we do nation building. Thing 1 is how the world works. And thing two is how to be productive in that world, just productive in that world, being able to provide for yourself and your family. What does that mean? We teach people literacy. We teach people math, basic science, and productivity enhancement as a cultural element. For example, in productivity enhancement, principles of organization, doing your work ahead of time, diligent note-taking, cooperativeness, teamwork spirit, and so on. You're preparing people to work at and run schools, hospitals, government agencies, corporations, businesses of every size, and even their own personal family finance. Some cultures are lacking a lot of that shit. Somebody's got to fucking teach it to them, and it's going to be people that really kind of have mastered it. You know, like if the Swedes or the Germans or, you know, the fucking, like Japanese, Koreans or whatever, whoever the fuck runs shit super well, the Botswanese, people of Botswana, which is the most successful country in Africa by far, if they want to come in and teach me how to fucking run a place, yeah, I'm kind of interested because their shit looks real goddamn good and they're really good about it, right? Here's the thing. Other than non-criminality and following the rule of law, there should be no values taught. None. No religion, nothing. The local people should be allowed to keep all of their religious values that don't violate the civil rights of others. So if like cutting off other people's clitorises is in your religious value, it's not anymore, motherfucker. You better rewrite that fucking book. Because you do that shit or you promote that shit, you're doing some fucking time. But if your religion, you practice with yourself, you practice with your family, with your community, it doesn't ask for or demand that you hurt or violate the rights of others, it's totally good. If you want to, but it's not taught at the government level. The government schools only teach you math, literacy, science, and productivity enhancement to make you better at running the country. That's it. Religious education should be done, I think probably most people will agree, in every country, in the private institution. If you want to learn your religion or customs, you do it through family or community. You don't do it through government. Mixing church and state is almost always and almost everywhere a fucking terrible idea. Unless you want to go live in Iran. Be my guest. Now, if you actually succeed at all these things, you actually do at least establishing law and order, establish the rules and laws for wealth creation, and establish a basic primary education system, which has been done at least once in Singapore, all three of those, as a matter of fact. At some point, after what may take decades, that country has had decades of peace, freedom, and growing prosperity. Most people by this point, especially younger generations, are educated and are ready to take part in the democratic process. They now know enough about the world and how the world works in order to actually vote properly and elect people that know shit. Let's take a look at where that doesn't work. The Gazans, elected democratically, I might add, Hamas, a terrorist organization that is ethnocentric and genocidal. They did it. They picked the wrong people, and they fucked them for it. And now a ton of Gazans needlessly dying because they voted for a military organization that just wants to attack other people. That fucking sucks. People can make wrong choices. I think the Arab Spring, many of those countries, Egypt, for example, there's democracy, dope, but they voted in like radical Islamists that have made their standard of living kind of flatline and made Egypt a worse place to be than it used to be. So when most people are educated and ready to take part in the democratic process, now you're starting to be like, okay, we may be able to start transitioning. Here's a really, really big one that comes as a result of several years or decades of this. When people are wealthy enough to have their basic needs met and then some, time for recreation, and they're growing in wealth, they are very, very poorly incentivized for crazy revolutions and huge, humongous changes. They don't look at candidates that are going to upend the system the same way. A couple of examples. China has most of their people now at a decent standard, really decent, not amazing, not Western standards, but way better than before. Most people in China have enough food and have some leisure time and leisure activities. The Chinese government really locks China down because they're real fucking worried that those people in China are now thinking, hey, listen, like, nobody better rock the boat on some crazy communist regressive shit. I'm not trying to go to war with anyone because, like, I want my fucking TV and I want my food and I want my everything, you get used to a high standard of living. You don't want anyone to muck up the economy. Probably an even better example is the failure to elect, in some case, or failure for really mass support of somebody like Elizabeth Warren, if you guys remember a few years back, or Bernie Sanders. These are people that wanted to kind of like upend capitalism, and even people pretty far to the left that like order Uber Eats and work for Amazon. They're like, yeah, I think we got to like change and hope, like that Obama shit. Like undoing capitalism, yeah, like it sounds like a bad idea, man. It sounds like I might not be able to get a paycheck next week, and where am I going to get food from? When people have nothing to lose, fuck yeah, revolution. I'm fucking starving out here. Fuck yeah, I'm going to pick up a gun and fucking revolt. But when I got it pretty goddamn good, status quo bias is a motherfucker. And in this case, we're making it work for us because if some crazy ass would-be dictator comes up in this country again and goes, people, we can revolt against this provisional government. A lot of people are like, bro, the last 15 years or 10 years or 5 years have been fucking amazing compared to before. Fuck you. Fuck that. I'm not getting on this train again. Go fuck yourself. I got my fucking apartment. I got food in the fucking fridge and food at the grocery store. I'm not getting shot at outside. Whatever idea you have that's going to turn the clock back on that, I'm not into it. That's such a fucking big deal. The probability of a violent revolution in Sweden or in France or in Taiwan is really, really fucking low because people have it pretty decent. When do people revolt violently? Oftentimes is when the standard of living fucking sucks. You get people a couple of years of good times, and the good times are improving. People have opportunities. They're expanding their wealth. There's a lot of people like in Russia, for example, millions of people literally fled Russia when Russia started a war with Ukraine because they were like, dude, I'm a fucking influencer on social media. I have my own page. I had 50,000 followers on TikTok or whatever. I don't want to go to, what the fuck are we doing going to war? They just left. So they went somewhere else where they're insanely productive. It's a huge statement of fact that once you stabilize a country and once you start to make it wealthier, a lot of people are like, yeah, let's not do any revolutions. And that's what you want. You don't want a revolutionary environment because revolutions generally suck. Some of them are dope and they end up really well. Other times they're not dope. And I will actually contend that this is super, and feel free to get offended at this, it's just true. The American Revolution, the United States Revolution against England, was probably almost wholly pointless. Maybe historically it was a big deal, but if you look at all of the other colonies that England started that had similar features that didn't revolt, they're doing just about as well as the United States, sometimes better in many cases. Canada never really had a revolution. They're doing great. Australia, they're doing great. I mean, fuck, you can go down the list. British colonies did pretty well, even though they never revolted. So revolution, if you look at the average revolution, it makes things much worse than much better. And because in this case, the revolution would be against obvious, objectively proven ways to progress and get people a better standard of living, we don't want it. Making people wealthier is a big fucking deal. Another thing, years it's been now, months, years, maybe decades, depending on how long this takes, crime is low. Has been kept low. This is essential. If you don't lower crime, you get nothing. And trust in institutions is growing. When I go to the bank, I know it's open. I know I'm getting my money. You can't do that in Zimbabwe where the fucking inflation rate's like 10,000% a day sometimes. No joke. Look that up. If you get trust in institutions, you know that you call 911, the people come in and get you and drive you to the hospital. You know that when you go to school, that are going to teach your children just normal bullshit that's not controversial. They're not going to try to propagandize or steal your kids or some crazy shit like that. You start to get trust in institutions. Like if I call the police in America, I know cops are going to show up and they're generally going to be reasonable people that I can talk to. So this only happens via really hardcore anti-corruption measures. And I'm a really, really big kind of a zero tolerance for corruption type of person, especially if enforced by an external body. So much as sniff fucking corruption, you're fucking done. Nasty fucking jail time, insane sentencing, real straightforward shit because corruption is a non-starter. But once you don't have corruption for a while, people start to be able to trust institutions. They trust each other more. You get closer to Sweden style where people just trust each other for damn near anything and don't even fucking lock their doors half the time. When you get immigrants from other countries that don't have these values, you start locking your doors. You guys know I'm going with that. At this point, you can slowly integrate democracy. When the people are ready to run their own country, at first, you give them very few choices. They elect a candidate or one of several candidates. They have a consensus government. At first, the government just isn't in charge of a lot of stuff. But slowly, as they show that they're in charge of stuff and it works well and the corruption's still low, you expand the scope of their government and contract the scope of the provisional government. And all of a sudden, you find yourself at some point that we don't even need to be here anymore. Like the U.S. took over Japan. U.S. and the Allies took over Japan after World War II, took over Germany. And after a while, they were like, we don't really need to be here anymore because, like, these guys fucking have it handled. It is a possibility. It can take some time, and it can be pretty fucking brutal. But I'm here to tell you at least one really important thing. There's no alternative to the brutality. You either have a much longer, much more brutal Haiti-style situation until the people kind of organize themselves, which could take millennia, maybe hundreds of years, dozens of years, or you bite the bullet hard and you get a much more, much less fucked up version, though still really fucked up, as the civilizing process tends to be, for much shorter. That's the alternative. It really pains me, guys, on a personal level, kind of emotional level. I'm getting my feelings ahead of myself here, but when especially super well-meaning people, like on the political left, for example, they see a country fucking decaying, and they're like, well, we can't go in there because we can't preach our values and we're not going to do colonialism. Dope. Super easy to say from Switzerland. Go to Congo, motherfucker. Say that shit there. You're going to want colonialism real goddamn soon. Fucked up? Totally. True? Yeah, it's fucking true. Until that culture and the people and the institutions and the trust is there, and until those folks are ready to run their own democratic countries, pretending that they can, which we tried in Iraq and Afghanistan, for example, is pointless and hurts real fucking people. It's hurting them right now. Now, finishing out the conversation, I'm going to talk about the downsides of this approach so that at least you guys know I'm not totally crazy. First, this will be politically radioactive to openly discuss. Most people just have too many feelings for this level of admitting flawed reality. Sometimes shit is fucked up, and it's just fucked up. And sometimes the medicine to fix that fucked up shit is also fucked up, just less so. But if the medicine is fucked up less by a factor of 10 than the situation, that level of 10 less fucked up than the situation, compared to what we have in the modern world, like how Norway operates, is like 150,000 times bigger than the level of fucked up you typically see in Norway. But again, Norway is not Congo. And you might have to take a step down of less fucked up, but still fucked up, in order to eventually get to Norway levels of almost nothing is fucked up. Most people are just not interested in this whole situation. Ultimately exemplified by Queers for Palestine. If you're openly gay in Palestine, they just kill you. You cannot possibly hold that tenable position. So are you going to be against Hamas, for example, or are you going to be pro-LGBT? You can't be both, right? Is it fucked up to be against Hamas? Yes, these are people in some sense trying to defend their own fucking homes from fucking Zionists. Totally. But is it better for them to win and for gay people to get eliminated by force? I don't know. Probably not, right? So it's super politically radioactive to discuss any of this, which is why I think it'll almost never get traction. And in fact, if I had to make a prediction, I think we're just going to get to a drug and genomic intelligence increasing before we ever get to executing this properly in the world. Thank God, because this is brutal. We just make everyone smarter and then educate everyone, and everyone's going to be like, dude, fuck totalitarianism and religious ideology. This is fucking stupid. Let's all respect each other and live happily ever after. I think that's coming sooner than this, so which is one of the reasons, big downside, right? Next, huge downside, putting third parties in charge of others can cause insane abuses. What did many of the white colonists do for Africa? Two things. One is they increased the standard of living for the African colonies which they established by, 100 or 1,000 or some shit like that. People were living fucking hand to mouth. Just the average standard of living for all non-civilized peoples was insanely low for forever. They bumped that like crazy. South Africa, way higher standard of living after the white folks came in there and did what they do. What else did they do? The other thing is, I said rape, Scott. Now I said it twice. We'll see if we get fucked for it. Maybe bleep it out. We'll see. Sexually exploit, murder, harass, intimidate, economically exploit millions. That's fucked up. Putting third parties in charge of other people who sometimes consider the other people subhuman and have carte blanche is terrible. Is it better than total uncivilized war and chaos for forever? Maybe. That's fucked up. But good news, we're now in the modern world. We can just X out both of those and have an unreal amount of internal oversight within the provisional government so that we ferret out any abuses. Abuses still occur. We're human after all, but you can get the abuses down to 1,000th of what they typically are, and then you're talking about a really, really fundamentally great thing you got going on. So a lot of people that are left of center politically and say we shouldn't be doing this to people, we shouldn't be running their lives, quit your job, go over there, work for the provisional government as a third-party investigator of corruption for the provisional government, not for the local people, for the government itself. Ferret out. It's like if you really hate police abuse, don't hold signs that say, stop the police. Go get you a job in internal affairs and go bust dirty cops. That's how you win together. Do your fucking job. Period. That's how that would work. But easier said than done, for sure. It's still potential for lots of abuse, even by modern countries. Next one, big downside. A lot of people, maybe most, don't want to be civilized by outsiders. So they will fight decades-long wars of resistance. Here we have to admit something that few other people will admit. Most of these people can't govern their own lands, just can't do it, as evidenced by them not doing it and just fighting each other all the fucking time. A lot of times people who are sympathetic to them will call them freedom fighters, but they're not freedom fighters. They are not fighting for freedom. They're generally warlords that are fighting, Hamas, for example, almost all warlords, fighting for their turf, / their people, seen very ethnocentrically, / their lingual group, / their ethnicity. And here's the thing, it's not new. That's what feudalism was. That's how the world went from 0 AD to 2000 AD, as we started with all and only warlords and chaos and insane levels of war all the time, and we winnowed it down to being civilized by your own people, which many people also didn't like, and to being civilized by others. That was just a thing that happened. The whole thing was brutal, but the warlord shit isn't the freedom shit. It's even more brutal than the civilizing process. That's the fucked up thing. If left to their own devices, you leave people to run their own country, in these cases, the country will be an abysmal place to live for the people living there. Case in point. We say, hey, like, we shouldn't go into Haiti. Now, there's a big reason why most countries haven't gone into Haiti. So they tried it before, it didn't really work, half-hearted effort, and no one wants the bad PR of having to kind of oppress a people into living in a civilized way. But if you say, okay, don't go into Haiti, we can't tell these people how to live, we can't civilize people through outside force. All right, dope. Do you want to go to Haiti for vacation? Like, fuck that, dude. I'm going to get killed, fucking kidnapped, maybe eaten alive. Yep. Got any other ideas? Education? Sweet. Go take a book over there. Good luck. Right? When the alternative is fucking awful, but the reality is 10 times more terrible, you get no love proselytizing and convincing people to do the alternative. But it's real easy, like I said earlier, to close your eyes to what's actually happening in that place. If your country, let's say you're from the United Kingdom, and the United Kingdom decides we're going to go fucking civilize Haiti. Better example, Haitians speak French. France is going to go in and fucking civilize Haiti. Straight up. It's real easy to be a French young person at, a university and, hey, free Haiti sign, and we shouldn't be over there. This is fucking terrible. Super easy to do that because you live in France and you can carry a sign that says anything, and the police have their batons and shit to make sure shit doesn't get out of hand, but you can spit in their faces, say fuck you, and nothing happens to you because you have the benefit of civilization. But you're probably not going to Haiti, motherfucker, and there's a good reason for that, because that place fucking blows. So it's super easy to say, well, we shouldn't interfere because you don't live there. And a lot of times, this is the real talk that doesn't get covered often in the media, a lot of the more educated, more intelligent people in that society, slightly more worldly people, business people, academians, etc., they want external powers to please, for the love of God, come in and fucking help us. The Russians, my own people, did that with the Nordic peoples for many, many, many dozens of years, potentially even millennia, inviting external kings and princes, please, for the love of God, help us run the shit. And that happened all the way up until the US and England and Germany helped to essentially build huge fractions of even the Soviet Union back in its early days. So a lot of the people in the country that are the best positioned to lead and the foremost thinkers, they're for bringing in external people, because we tried it ourselves. This shit did not fucking work. It's so fucked up to say that. And people who don't want to be civilized by outsiders, they're going to put up a fight, and it's going to be fucking nasty, which is terrible and a huge downside of this approach. So, as I said, and I have this in my notes just to put a fine point on it, maybe beat it to death a little bit too much. Example is Haiti. Haiti is a bad place to be. If a provisional government was installed, let's say by the French, and rebels fought against it for like 5 years, a lot of progressives in France and all over the world, very well-meaning, very, very charitable people, would be wearing Free Haiti t-shirts. But what does it mean to free Haiti? It means a descent again into chaos, the kind of chaos you would pay all of the money in your bank account to desperately avoid, the kind of chaos you don't live in. So it's a bit obscene to say we should free a place, even though we're freeing it from rule of law and prosperity. Nah, man, I'm good. Fuck that. Now, this is patronizing as fuck. All meant with love and respect. But at the extreme ends of failed state dynamics, we have a situation where coming in and controlling the government for a while is, by analogy, similar to adults finding a house in some neighborhood, and that whole house, the whole household, is run. There's no one there over the age of 10. It's 10-year-olds and below. 10 people, the oldest is 10, the youngest is 5. Finding a house run by 10-year-olds. The house will almost certainly be in constant chaos, dirt, huge mess. Some of the children may actually be starving at that point. There's going to be a crazy amount of fighting. Hell. Just hell. Right from the picture books, minus the red devil with the fucking horns. If parents, adults, come in and run the house, of course, many of the kids will rebel. If you're the fucking head 10-year-old in charge and some other person you've never seen tells you, hey, look, you got to go to your room and clean up and do this and we'll help you, but now you got to go to school, you're not going to like that. You will absolutely rebel. But the rebellion is a bad thing. It causes regression. It causes you not to have food again. It causes chaos. That's what you're living in. We have no problem admitting in almost every case that adults can run systems better than kids on the community scale, on the household scale. No problem. If you had some weird community in some mountain town in Kentucky in which like 12 or 10-year-olds were in charge, you'd be like, what the fuck is this, Lord of the Flies? Get some fucking people from the state and some charity organizations and go in there and run the shit for the holy fuck. How did this happen? And I promise you, it would not be a very nice place. We admit that adults can run systems better than kids on the community scale and the household scale. Is it fucked up to say that modern countries are in some sense the adults of the world and might on occasion have to run countries for folks who are more like the children of the world? Not in any deep respect thing. They just happen to be stuck in places that are run by people, warlords, that reason very much like children. Nothing to do with genetics or intelligence or race at all. Why? Russia's a fucked up place, and I wish someone came and ran that. It's all the whitest people you've ever seen, and I'm fucking Russian. Fuck would I say that for? It's just a matter of fact that some people are better at running shit than others, categorically, because they implement proper policies and other people don't. If some people are more like adults and other people are more like children in the sense that they're unable to organize their own effective society, is it fucked up to admit that, to say that, to even consider it? Definitely to say it out loud like I am now. Yes, majorly so. You know how fucking problematic it is to say that some people in the world are acting more like children and some people are acting more like adults? Oh my fucking God. Off. Is it fucked up? Yeah. Fuck yeah. Is it true, however? Maybe. Unfortunately so, but maybe. Do we have to go out and nation build? No. If you're going to nation build and fail, you're going to fail mostly because you don't do the kind of shit I was talking about, in my view. If you actually execute a plan that's mostly like what you're talking about, you give yourself the highest chance of success. And at the end of that road isn't some pride for fucking, civilizing people. It's watching people of all nations and all cultures and all races have freedom and prosperity and all good things. Because in much of the world, they don't. And it's easy for us in our wealthy countries with freedom and all that shit to pretend they don't exist, or just pretend that everyone has roughly the same kind of life everywhere, because they fucking don't. Hopefully, revolutions in biotech, etc., and AI will help this process massively without the need to go civilize people militarily. And I hope this never comes to pass. And I'm not an advocate of this approach, but it is an approach you should think about. At least think about why attempts to nation build and grow democracy in places like Iraq and Afghanistan failed, because they never did any of this. And if you look at how the shit is structured, first rule of law, then economic prosperity, then culturally reformatting so people know how to democratically run, it makes some fucking sense. Anyway, this may be by far the most controversial video I'll make in some time. And next time I think I'm talking about AI again. Yay. See you then.